You can become virtually immortal with one of the curious items in Black Myth Wukong, and there are actually so many other options that are way better than at a first glance. So today I'm going to go over the top 10 best picks in the full game, as well as how to truly make the most out of them and really get all of those benefits. Let's begin with probably the best, earliest curious item in the game, which is the Tiger's Tally, the one that you get from the Tiger boss in the Secret Kingdom of Chapter 2. But this pretty much remains one of the best items in the game at buffing up your attack rating, because if you just perform consecutive light attack hits, this will increase your attack rating. And you only need to perform about 5 consecutive light attacks to get an 8% attack rating increase, which is actually really good and very effective. It lasts for 6 seconds, so it's also very easy to continuously perform those light attacks anyway. But this also couples really well with the Tiger Tendon legendary belt that you get from the Court of Illumination in Chapter 4. You're going to have this Tiger Serpent enemy nearby that if you farm, as I've said before, you can eventually have this as a drop. And they stack with one another, providing an almost 20% attack rating increase just from these two. That's because the second one is going to provide an 11% extra attack rating increase when you see through enemies' attacks. So as long as you just use the see-through mechanic, you're going to stack both of these buffs. But apparently it also seems to work with just regular deflects from the Rock Solid, so you can also use that if you want a more reliable source of extra attack rating. And that can actually stack for some really nice damage, which is pretty much New Game Plus, but you can see how amazing it still remains even so late in the game. Now the next item is the MRAA Orb, and recently I discovered this is way better than I initially thought. It can make you virtually immortal as you can continuously stack that cheat death mechanic buff off it. So its description says that you have to land enough successful hits on the enemy to avoid the next fatal blow. However, in reality, you have to perform around 100 attacks against these targets before that buff triggers, which you will see appearing below your HP bar. And those 100 attacks don't even have to be consecutive. There can be a gap that can be pretty long from my testing, so you can take a small few seconds break before you move to the next target. And you can easily stack 100 attacks against any target by just using mobile spin. Literally takes no more than 5 to 7 seconds to pull it off with the mobile spin, or in the case of a boss fight, during that fight. And once you have it, you don't have to worry about one fatal blow following up. You're going to see this bubble forming when that happens, so you can then, for example, heal up or just go ahead and stun the enemy, do another 100 quick mobile spins, and that's going to cause the buff to again restack on you, rinse and repeat, and you basically get to never die, at least if you play properly. If you haven't seen my previous video, this can be found at the Mindfulness Cliff Shrine in Chapter 3. It's pretty much that path downwards, and once you get at the end of this location, you're going to find the chest containing it. Of course, if you're in Chapter 3, the next item is completely missable, but it's also extremely strong. It's the Auspicious Lantern, and it's one of the best if you couple this with the Cloud Step build. So this is going to inflict the same Chant Beguilement effect on you when you go in the Cloud Step with this equipped, which in turn is going to increase your attack and also reduce your maximum HP. But that damage increase is really high, it's 10%, while in the Cloud Step, meanwhile, the HP reduction is about 80. So yes, early on, that 80 HP sounds taxing, but as you progress in the game, it's barely anything. Like, in the end game, you have 700 to 800 plus, so you're essentially trading 10% of your HP for 10% increased damage. Plus, that damage buff lasts for another 15 seconds after breaking the Cloud Step, so once you exit invisibility, you're still going to retain that buff. You can then combine this with the Eagle's Eye Relic perk, which is going to let you cast Cloud Step pretty much twice as often. It reduces that cooldown by half if you successfully hit the target with it. And even more so, you can combine it with some other crit builds using, for example, the Wukong Mythical Armor, so that you can really spam all of your spells, including the Cloud Step, and basically get a 10% increased damage all the time. Now, to get this in the first place, you have to defeat the 9 Beguiled Lantern enemies in Chapter 3 Pagoda Realm before you actually go on to defeat the Captain Wise Voice. So you have to do this while he's triggering that realm effect overall. And the first two you can find on the way to the lower pagoda waypoint, so easy to take them down. Then 3 and 4 you can find on the next path after the lower pagoda waypoint. The fifth one is immediately after the upper pagoda waypoint. Once you reach here, you're going to see it right in front of you. 6 and 7 is going to be further away from the upper waypoint after you pass that really annoying wooden beam section with the two enemies. The eighth one is going to be a bit further back on the same path, typically going in and out of this room to your left side. The ninth and final one is going to be on the secret path from the many wheel, so you have to reach almost close to the boss arena and then backtrack a little bit going past this nearby cliff. Go ahead, jump down at the end of it into the follow-up below section, and yeah, you're going to see that spawn right in front of you after going into the back of it. Be careful because there's also a spirit in the area, but if you take it down, you should see that auspicious lantern dropping for you. Of course, we can't talk about extra damage without mentioning a very interesting mechanic via the thunderflame seal. Now, this is something that's completely farmable, so you can get multiple per single playthrough, and each provides a 30 extra mana for you. So if you get 3, for example, in one playthrough, that's 90 extra mana, which is really big. But we don't use that to summon abilities or cast spells. It's actually best if you use this with a spellbinder via the smart move mana to attack rating conversion. For example, at 585 mana in this case, a rank 2 smart move converts that into almost 100 extra attack. Basically free double damage, and it lasts for a very long time, pretty much for as long as you keep that spellbinder on. And the thing about this is that the damage provided only takes a snapshot of your current mana at the time of the spellbinder activation. Meaning that once you activated Spellbinder, what you can do is to just take off the Thunderflame seals and replace them with other damage conversion items. So you can pretty much have that and you're still going to retain the full damage conversion that you had when you had the seals on. Now to get this, it's a very rare drop from some of these electric mages at the Thunderclap Temple. So right from the entrance, you're going to immediately find 4 of them and about 4 more if you go deeper into the temple. It is going to be a very long farm, so just rinse and repeat until you actually see them drop. Coming up next, we have the Preservation Orb, and I just become even more in love with this one. This is going to provide a very good increase to max HP, mana, and stamina upon resurrection. So it gives about 60 extra HP and mana and about 40 extra stamina when you resurrect. However, it doesn't just trigger on resurrection, it also triggers on teleportation when you use the Incense Trail Talisman. So the moment you use that, even if you're close to the same waypoint, you're going to get those benefits right away. And just like in the case of the previous trick, this is also going to linger even after you have taken off the Preservation Orb, meaning that you can again replace it with something else. So you can both take advantage of the new stats as well as increase your other damage sources or just get other benefits from previous curious items. It's pretty much like having an on-demand all the time best potion in the game without having any downside at all. You, by the way, get this on the same path where you also got into the secret chapter 4 area of the Purple Cloud Mountain. So basically from the Court of Illumination, going by these 2 archways right here, up the mountain, eventually you're going to reach this junction, go downstairs pretty much through this bigger cave up into that bigger yard in the back. This is where you're going to find this bigger tree, and behind it you're going to see there's a table with a chest containing the Preservation Orb. Go ahead, grab it, it's definitely going to be one of the best items you need. Now there's one more item I want to cover quickly before going into the last one that in my opinion is the best, and that's going to be the Roshan sensor that you get from the first secret dragon long encounter in chapter 1 behind the waterfall. But this actually becomes much better in New Game Plus, if you can believe that. So this is going to give you a 15% damage reduction after drinking from a gourd and if there's no other gourd charges left. Now, in the early stages and in the first pre-New Game Plus run, it's not going to be that great because eventually you're going to fill up that charge. But if you go into New Game Plus, there's one gourd that you can take from the Shen Monkey, and that's going to be the King Tion gourd right here in New Game Plus. You can only buy this in New Game Plus and only if you have unlocked all of the character portraits before that in your journal. So that should be around 31 character portraits. So once you do get it, once you consume this, it's going to stay empty and then it slowly recharges over time. But it takes like 30 seconds, give or take, for that to fully recharge back. meaning that for that entire duration, you're going to have that 15% damage reduction on top of everything else. And since, yeah, you're going to have a lot of defenses regardless with the bulking armor at that stage anyway, this is going to stack very well and you're going to basically face tank enemies even better. Plus, that gourd eventually will charge by itself every like 30 seconds, give or take, so you can then consume it again, get the buff again, and you're not going to run out of it that often. Another item that we haven't covered before is the spine in the sack. Now this drops from the many spider sack enemies as well as a low chance drop from the cocoons in chapter 4, especially close to the upper hollows. This is where a few of them dropped for me. So this is something that you can farm multiple times per playthrough. They also seem to stack and will provide a 10% extra poison damage, which works really great with the centipede armor that you get from chapter 4. So this is a great substitute if you don't currently have critical chance options to buff up the poison application of that, especially with the venomous arm guards. Until then, this can help a ton to provide some extra damage. We're going to talk about ways to apply poison even better in just a bit, but yeah, eventually if you move on to this, it can help quite a bit with the build surrounding that. And as we covered before, it's one of the best builds in the game because of the high crit rating that it gives and all of the other benefits. And the last but not least, of course, the best in my opinion in the game has to be the Celestial Birthstone Fragment. Now this essentially ignores all the enemies for Bane resistances. So this means you can pretty much deal the full damage or even have the application on targets that may typically be immune or at the very least have high natural resistance against that typical Bane. Now this works a little bit iffy and it's not going to be equal for each of the 4 types of Banes. So for example, in the case of the snow enemies of chapter 3, you're still going to deal the full damage of frost attacks, but you will not be able to apply the adjacent freeze stun mechanic on top. It just doesn't seem to work against them. Now, I'm not sure exactly why that's the case. They still receive the full damage from frost attacks like the one from the frostbat. It's just that they don't get to be frozen in place like how other enemies do, despite having the Celestial Birthstone Fragment on. However, it does work with other elements. For example, if you go against poison targets with a poison build, if you have the Celestial on, you can still poison them just as usual, assuming that you have a proper build around it. And this is going to work really well against all of the chapter 4 enemies. I'm assuming even against the bosses, but in my case, I defeated them all. And since it works this way with the Poison Bane, I'm going to assume it's pretty similar with the fire as well against fire targets. As long as you have that, it's going to bypass all of those restrictions and resistances and still cause the build-up. It's just that the frozen effect is the only exception. In any case, you get this from the final frog boss encounter in chapter 6, the same one that also gives you one of the mythical armor pieces. Now, if for some reason it doesn't drop for you, it may be that you have to defeat all of the frog bosses from chapter 1 to chapter 6, not just Ling Bao Bao. So this also includes 1, 2, 3, 4, the secret one in the Bishri Cave in 5, and then the one in 6. But honestly, I think it should trigger with the one in 6 anyway. That's pretty much it. Let me know down below if there's any other curious item that you've been using and has a very strong effect. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.